Elena Petrova had never imagined that her wedding day would smell like dust and hay. When she stepped off the aging bus into the quiet countryside of Montana, her thin suitcase in one hand and her heart trembling inside her chest, she felt the wind tug at her veil like a warning. This was not the city she had dreamed of. No towering buildings, no glittering lights, no polished marble floors, just endless fields stretching under a pale sky and a lonely dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. She had crossed an ocean believing she was marrying a struggling American farmer, a simple man who needed a wife as much as she needed a new life. That was what the letters had said. That was what the agency had promised. A hardworking man, modest land, financial difficulties, a quiet life. She told herself she could survive quiet. Quiet was better than hunger. Quiet was better than the small apartment back in Ukraine, where winter crept through the cracked windows and her mother's medical bills piled like snowdrifts. The bus drove away in a cloud of dust, leaving her alone. And then she saw him. He stood beside an old pickup truck that looked at least 20 years past its prime, tall, broad-shouldered, worn denim jacket, cowboy boots scuffed from work. His dark hair moved in the wind, and though he looked strong, there was something guarded in his eyes. This was Daniel Hayes, the man she had agreed to marry without ever touching his hand. The man whose letters were brief but polite. The man who had written, "I don't have much, but I will give you honesty." She had expected someone older, perhaps desperate, perhaps unkind. But Daniel looked steady, quietly powerful. "You must be Elena," he said, his voice low and calm, like distant thunder across plains. She nodded, suddenly aware of how small she felt standing before him. "Yes." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two strangers bound by paperwork and promises. "You must be tired," he said. "The ranch is about 20 minutes from here." Ranch, the word surprised her. She had been told farm. Small farm, struggling crops, debt. She climbed into the truck without asking questions. The drive was silent except for gravel crunching beneath the tires. Elena watched the land roll past. It was vast, too vast for a poor man, she thought. But maybe land here was cheap, maybe appearances deceived. She reminded herself not to hope for more. Hope had betrayed her before. When they finally turned through a large wooden gate, her breath caught. The driveway stretched long and winding, lined with white fencing that looked freshly painted. In the distance stood a house, not a shack, not a weathered cabin, but a large, elegant ranch-style home with wraparound porches and tall windows that reflected the golden sun. Beyond it were multiple barns, fenced pastures, dozens of horses grazing peacefully. Her fingers tightened around her suitcase handle. "This is yours?" she asked carefully. Daniel glanced at her but didn't answer immediately. "It's home," he said simply. Home, that word again. As they pulled closer, she noticed workers, men repairing fencing, a woman leading two horses across the yard, trucks parked neatly near a massive red barn. This was not a struggling farm. This was a thriving operation. Elena felt a flicker of something she didn't yet recognize. Confusion, suspicion, fear. Inside, the house was warm and beautifully furnished. Hardwood floors polished to a soft glow. A stone fireplace stretching nearly to the ceiling. Framed photographs of horses, rodeos, and landscapes. The scent of fresh bread lingered in the air. "I thought," she began carefully. "You said in your letters that things were difficult." Daniel removed his jacket and set it over a chair. "They were." She waited for him to continue. But he didn't. Instead, he gestured toward the staircase. "Your room is upstairs. You don't have to share mine until you're ready." "I meant what I wrote. I won't force anything." That surprised her more than the house. He wasn't acting like a man who had purchased a bride. He was acting like a man afraid to frighten her. Upstairs, the bedroom prepared for her overlooked acres of land. The bed was large, draped in soft cream blankets. A bouquet of wildflowers rested on the dresser. Her name was written on a small card in careful handwriting. "Welcome home, Elena." Her chest tightened. Why would a poor farmer prepare something like this? She moved to the window and stared out at the land again. It stretched farther than she could see, horses running in the distance like shadows against the sun. What have I walked into? That evening, they sat across from each other at a long wooden dining table. The meal was simple but delicious. Roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, homemade bread. Daniel ate quietly, occasionally glancing up at her as if checking whether she might vanish. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked. "Why mail-order marriage?" He set his fork down slowly. "Because I was tired of being alone." There was no self-pity in his tone, just truth. "My parents built this ranch," he continued. "They died 5 years ago. After that, it didn't feel like much of a home anymore." Elena studied his face carefully. No arrogance, no prideful boasting. "You could have married anyone here," she said softly. "Not anyone," he replied. "Not someone who wanted the land. The air shifted between them. "You think I want the land?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what you want," he admitted. "But I didn't tell you everything in my letters for a reason." Her heart skipped. "What reason?" He leaned back slightly. "Because if you knew what this ranch is worth, you might have come for the wrong reasons." The words struck her like cold water. "Worth?
How much?"
she asked before she could stop herself. Daniel hesitated.
Enough. Enough.
That single word carried weight. Heavy, ominous. Her mind raced. Had she unknowingly married a wealthy man? Was this some kind of test? A trap? Was he measuring her reaction? "You lied," she said quietly. "I withheld," he corrected gently. "That's the same thing." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. "I needed to know you weren't coming for money." "And how exactly would you know that?" she demanded. "You brought me here without telling me the truth." Silence filled the space between them like smoke. Finally, he stood. "You're free to leave anytime, Alina. I'll buy you a ticket home tomorrow if that's what you want." The offer stunned her. No control, no threats, no anger, just freedom. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. She had come expecting hardship. Instead, she found mystery. Wealth hidden behind modest words. A man who seemed both powerful and deeply cautious. And she didn't know which frightened her more. Downstairs, Daniel stood alone on the porch, staring out at the darkened fields. The moonlight revealed the truth Elena hadn't yet discovered. The ranch was not just land. It was one of the largest privately owned horse breeding operations in the state, a legacy worth tens of millions. Investors constantly knocking at the gates, developers offering outrageous sums to buy it, newspapers once calling him the Silent King of Montana. He hated that title. He had withdrawn from society after his parents died. He downsized his public appearances, let rumors spread that he was struggling, that the ranch was declining, because wealth attracted the wrong kind of people. And Daniel Hayes was done being wanted for what he owned. He wanted to be chosen for who he was. Upstairs, Elena turned to her side, staring at the bouquet of wildflowers. She had come prepared to endure poverty. She had not prepared herself for secrets. And deep down, a whisper stirred in her heart. What if the real surprise wasn't the land? What if it was the man? The wind outside rustled through the fields, carrying with it the promise that nothing about this marriage would be simple. And neither of them yet understood. The greatest discovery was still waiting. Elena did not sleep. The house was too quiet, too large, too unfamiliar. Every creak of wood beneath the night wind felt like a question she could not answer. She had prepared herself for cold floors and shared blankets, for counting coins and stretching meals. Instead, she lay beneath soft sheets in a room that looked like it belonged to a woman who had always known comfort. It unsettled her more than poverty ever could. At dawn, she rose before the sun. Back home, mornings meant work. Routine gave safety. She dressed simply and stepped downstairs, expecting to find servants or hired hands preparing breakfast. Instead, she found Daniel alone in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, cooking. "You don't have staff for this?" she asked. He glanced at her, surprised she was awake. "We have workers for the ranch, not for the house." She watched him move around the kitchen with quiet competence. There was no arrogance in the way he handled things, no rich man's detachment. He cracked eggs, flipped them carefully, brewed coffee strong and dark. "You could afford it," she said carefully. "I don't want it." She didn't know what to do with that answer. Outside, the ranch was already alive. Horses moved in coordinated patterns through fenced pastures. Workers called to each other across the yard. The rhythm of labor hummed through the air like music. After breakfast, Daniel handed her a pair of boots. "You'll need these if you want to see the property." The property. The way he said it made it sound ordinary. They walked side by side through the fields. The morning sun spilled gold across the land, revealing just how vast it truly was. Fences stretched endlessly. Barns stood solid and well maintained. The horses were breathtaking, sleek coats, powerful builds, controlled strength in every movement. Elena slowed as they passed a group of chestnut mares grazing peacefully. "These aren't just farm horses," she said quietly.
No, they're show quality. Yes.
She turned to him slowly. "How many do you have?" 216. Her breath caught. No struggling farmer owned that. As they approached the largest barn, she noticed a polished plaque mounted near the entrance. Hayes Royal Bloodlines. Her eyes widened. Inside, the air smelled of hay and leather. Stalls were immaculate. A magnificent black stallion stood in the center enclosure, muscles rippling beneath glossy skin. He moved with an almost regal awareness. "That's Midnight Sovereign," Daniel said. Elena's pulse skipped. "I've heard that name," she whispered. "Even in Europe, Midnight Sovereign was famous in international breeding circles. A champion bloodline stallion valued at millions." "You own him," she breathed. Daniel's expression remained unreadable.
Yes.
The weight of truth finally settled fully on her shoulders. She hadn't married a poor farmer. She had married one of the most powerful horse breeders in North America. Why lie? She asked again, softer this time. He rested his hands on the stall gate. Because the last woman I tried to build a life with sued me for half the ranch before we even set a wedding date. The words were blunt, honest.
She didn't love you,
Elena said quietly. No. The pain in that single syllable was sharper than any dramatic confession. Elena stepped closer to Midnight Sovereign, letting the horse sniff her hand. The stallion didn't flinch. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, calm and curious. He trusts you, Daniel observed. Animals sense truth, she replied. And what do you sense? She hesitated. I sense that you are afraid. His jaw tightened. Off me. No, she said gently. Off losing something again. The wind moved softly through the open barn doors. For the first time, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. Later that afternoon, a black luxury SUV pulled into the driveway. Elena watched from the porch as a sharply dressed man stepped out, followed by a woman in designer heels. They did not look like ranch visitors. Who are they? She asked. Daniel's expression hardened. Developers. The word carried disdain. The man approached with a wide smile.
Daniel!
I was hoping you'd reconsider our offer. I haven't, Daniel replied flatly. The woman's gaze slid toward Elena.
Calculating. Curious.
And this must be your bride, she said sweetly. How unexpected. Elena felt the judgment beneath the compliment. The developer continued. Our investors are prepared to double the previous offer. This land could become a luxury equestrian resort. 5-star amenities, international clientele. You'd triple your current annual revenue. Daniel's voice turned to steel. It's not for sale. Everything is for sale, the man insisted. Name your price. Silence. The horses in the distance moved restlessly as if sensing tension. Daniel stepped forward slightly. You can leave. The man's smile thinned. You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. And you're letting greed cloud yours. The SUV drove away minutes later, dust swirling behind it. Elena turned to him. How much are they offering? He didn't answer immediately. More than you think. She studied him carefully.
And you won't sell?
No. Why? He looked out at the fields, the barns, the animals moving like pieces of his soul. Because this isn't property, he said quietly. It's my parents' life's work. It's their hands in every fence post, their fingerprints in every stall. Selling it would feel like burying them twice. Something shifted inside her then. For the first time, she stopped seeing the land as wealth. She saw it as memory, as legacy, as love. That evening, as the sky burned orange and red across the horizon, Elena stood alone near the fences watching the horses run. The wind tugged at her hair. She felt small against the vastness, but not in a frightened way. In a free way. Daniel approached quietly. You can still leave, he reminded her again. She turned to face him. You keep saying that. I don't want you trapped. I am not trapped, she said slowly. He searched her face, as if trying to detect hidden motive. You don't seem excited about the money, he observed. I didn't come for money. Then why did you come? The question lingered between them. She swallowed. Because I was tired of surviving, she admitted. I wanted a chance at something stable, something honest, even if it was poor. He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the warmth of him. And if it's not poor, then I hope it's still honest. Their eyes locked. For the first time, the air between them did not feel like suspicion. It felt like possibility. But neither of them noticed the figure watching from a distance near the edge of the property, a woman standing beside her car, hidden partially by trees. Her name was Victoria Langford, and she was not a developer. She was Daniel's former fiancée, the woman who believed half the ranch already belonged to her, and she had just discovered he was married. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, shadows stretched long across the land. Elena felt something stirring in her chest, a dangerous mix of curiosity and hope. She had come expecting a poor farmer instead. She had found a guarded king, but she did not yet understand. The greatest threat to their marriage was not money. It was the past. The next morning arrived too peacefully for the storm that was coming. Elena woke before Daniel again, but this time the silence of the house did not feel heavy. It felt thoughtful. She moved toward the window and watched the sun spill across the land. The horses were already active, their silhouettes cutting through golden light. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Belonging. Downstairs, Daniel stood at the counter reading paperwork. His posture was rigid, jaw tense. Something's wrong, she said immediately. He folded the document slowly. Victoria filed a legal notice this morning. The name landed between them like broken glass. Elena, He continued carefully, before you, I was engaged. We were together for almost a year. She knew about the ranch. About everything.
And?
Alina asked, though she sensed she wouldn't like the answer. She's claiming breach of financial partnership. Says she invested time and resources under the assumption of shared ownership. Alina blinked.
Time. Yes.
That's not investment. That's dating. His mouth twitched faintly despite the tension. Her lawyers disagree. A strange calm settled over Alina. She had grown up watching people fight over crumbs. She understood desperation. But this felt different. This is about pride, she said.
Yes. And money. Yes. And control. His eyes met hers.
Yes.
A car engine echoed in the distance. They both turned toward the driveway. The same black SUV from the day before pulled in. But this time Victoria stepped out first. She was strikingly beautiful, polished, confident, dressed like she belonged in a city skyscraper, not on open land. Her heels sank slightly into the gravel, but she carried herself like she owned the ground. Elena felt the difference between them immediately. Victoria walked forward without hesitation. So, she said smoothly, her eyes sliding over Elena. This is the replacement. Daniel stepped slightly in front of Elena, not possessive but protective. She's my wife. Victoria smiled thinly. Convenient timing. Elena did not retreat. She stepped beside Daniel instead. I didn't know he was wealthy when I married him, she said calmly. Victoria laughed softly. That's adorable. Nuff, Daniel said firmly. Victoria's gaze sharpened. You think marriage protects you. You think hiding behind some foreign bride keeps you safe.
Half this ranch is mine.
It was never yours, Daniel replied. Victoria pulled a folded paper from her bag. We'll let the court decide that. She turned and walked back to her vehicle, leaving tension thick in the air. When the SUV disappeared, Elena exhaled slowly. She won't win, Daniel said, though the certainty sounded forced. Elena turned to him. Tell me the truth, she said gently. Did you promise her anything? He hesitated.
Was.
Her heart dropped slightly. I promised her a life, he continued. I promised we would build something together. But I never signed ownership, never transferred assets. I learned my lesson early. Elena studied him carefully.
You don't trust easily, she said. No, but you married me. His gaze softened. That scares me too.
The days that followed were tense. Lawyers visited, papers were reviewed. Rumors began spreading through nearby towns. Articles resurfaced about Daniel Hayes, the reclusive ranch owner worth millions. Photographers attempted to capture images of the mysterious new bride. Elena felt exposed. One afternoon, she found herself standing inside the main barn again, watching midnight sovereign pace. The stallion sensed unrest, his movements sharper than usual. You feel it too, don't you? She whispered to the horse. Footsteps approached. It wasn't Daniel. It was one of the ranch hands, an older man named Carl.
Mom,
he said respectfully, I've worked here 30 years. Your husband's father built this place from nothing. Daniel turned it into an empire. Empire. The word made her uncomfortable. Carl continued, developers have tried before. So have competitors. But the land isn't the most valuable thing here.
Elena frowned. Then what is? The bloodline contracts, Carl said.
Exclusive breeding rights, international partnerships, stakes in 3 major racing circuits. This ranch isn't just land, it's influence. The realization hit her fully then. Daniel didn't just own property. He owned power. That night, she confronted him. You're more than a rancher, she said quietly. He didn't deny it.
I didn't want you to see that first. Why?
Because power changes how people look at you. She stepped closer. And how do you want me to look at you? Like a man, he answered. Not an opportunity. The vulnerability in his voice broke something inside her. I didn't come for opportunity, she whispered. I came for stability.
And now, she reached for his hand. Now I'm staying for you.
The words hung between them. Simple,
honest, real.
For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to pull her fully into his arms. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't possessive. It was careful, as if he feared she might disappear if he held her too tightly. Outside, the wind swept across acres of land worth fortunes. But inside that quiet embrace, something more valuable formed. Trust. Weeks later, the court hearing arrived. Victoria entered the courtroom poised and confident. Her legal team presented claims of verbal commitments and implied partnership. But Daniel's documentation was meticulous. No shared accounts, no ownership contracts, no signed agreements. The judge ruled swiftly. Case dismissed. Victoria's composure cracked for just a second, just long enough for Elena to see it. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters gathered.
Mrs. Hayes,
one called. Did you know how wealthy your husband was before marrying him? Elena paused. Daniel tensed beside her. She looked directly at the cameras. I knew he was honest, she said clearly.
That was enough.
The statement spread quickly. Headlines shifted from speculation to admiration. Public perception softened. Back at the ranch that evening, Daniel stood beside her on the porch as the sun dipped low. "You could have taken advantage," he said quietly. "Many would have." "I don't want what you own," she replied softly. "What do you want?" She looked across the fields, at the horses, the barns, the land that carried legacy and memory. "I want to build something that lasts," she said. "Not because of money, because of meaning." He turned to face her fully. "You already have." The wind moved through her hair as he kissed her gently for the first time, not as strangers bound by arrangement, but as partners choosing each other. Alana had crossed an ocean expecting a poor farmer. Instead, she discovered a man who owned millions in land, contracts, and bloodlines. But what he truly owned was integrity, and what she truly found was love that could not be bought. As the night settled over the vast Montana sky, the ranch stood stronger than ever, not because of wealth, but because two guarded hearts had finally chosen trust over fear, and that was worth more than everything Daniel Hayes possessed.